Human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. Beware of false knowledge. It's more dangerous than ignorance. Knowledge is the treasure of a wise man. Forget all you know, or think you know. Abandon power and enforce decree. Inward, where the deepest rivers flow. Find the currents of eternity. Welcome to my mania. Hello. How are you doing? It's Jake Johnson here with Untethered Live. At the moon. Rocking and rolling and whatnot. Glad to be here. Hope you are too. Woo! There, that's better. Got my nice hot cup of coffee. The wind's blowing in my hair. On the moon. Well, slightly above the moon. It's a nice day. It's been a little rainy, a little hot, but we're here, and we're ready to have a good podcast. Anybody joining me yet? Hello, hello, hello. Hey, Darlene, how are you? Nice to see you. Got some good stuff I'm going to talk about tonight. Introduce you to a new idea. How are things going in Florida? Good. Glad to see you here. I think we got 2 people here so far. Good. I'm just kind of chilling, drinking some coffee. It's been a kind of uneventful day. You ready? I'm ready. Great Sky Troll, what's happening, buddy? You missed the last one, you were working. That's all right. I'm here 3 times a week. You ain't got to see all of them. I understand people got things to do. You were working for free, I see. Well, that's never good. Can't work for free. You don't make any money that way. But I have to say I can relate. I'm working for free too. Yeah, she called me after I got off the air Saturday night. I was sitting there laid back after I finished the podcast, just kind of chilling out. The phone rang and it was her and Kevin, and they were at some kind of party, and Kevin was drunk, and they invited me to come down and officiate things in October. Thought that was very nice. I'm honored. Yes, ma'am. So with any luck, you'll see me in October. Might do a podcast from wherever I end up. Obviously, I'll bring my gear. Somebody had to put me up because I don't know anything about Florida anymore. But I'll be there. Girl needed a wall, a door, and a lock. Couldn't buy her house before she gave birth, but I did build her a room. Congratulations to the birth, and nice job building a room. Oh, I know you will. I have no doubts. It'll be a fun time. I'll probably stay a couple days and mosey on back. I'm debating now whether or not to ride my motorcycle down there. It's a long ride, but it'd be a fun ride. Of course, I don't know where I'm going, so might not want to take my bike into that neighborhood. I don't know yet. As I said, it's been a while since I've been in Florida. Couldn't have changed that much. Yep, it's about 6 hours, 7 hours, something like that. Maybe 8. Seems like I remember that stretch from Lake City to Orlando being kind of a long one. It's been a while since I've been to Florida, though. Fort Myers? Okay, that's not too bad. Of course, I haven't heard anything from them in a couple of days. Well, since Saturday, so I don't know if they were just talking drunk or not. I have to wait till they call me back sober and confirm that that's what they want to do. But if they want to do it, I'll be honored to do it. I've done it before. Married my sister. And about 10 other people around here. It's becoming a thing. Might actually have to just start marrying people. What'd you think, Great Sky Troll? Minister Johnson? Pastor Jake? Got done 16 hours before she popped. That's Cecil's grandkid. My baby mama's older brother. His grandbaby. That's Deborah's great-granddaughter. Wow. I know one of those people. Well, did it go off well? Was the baby born with all 10 fingers and toes and healthy? No COVID and all that stuff? That'd be nice. Healthy baby. I remember having babies. That was fun. Back when it lasted. Looks like a little alien. Yeah, they usually do look like a little old man dipped in motor oil. But that means that they're healthy and that everything worked right. And when my daughter was born, they pulled her out and quickly rushed her over and laid her on this little table where they were cleaning her up and checking her feet and her blood pressure and all that stuff. And my baby sat straight up and looked at me. And it freaked me out because I didn't think little babies could do that. But she sure did. She sat straight up. Sat up. That was quite interesting. Her little eyes were so tiny they just looked like little slits in her head, you know. Couldn't even see her eyelashes. I'll never forget that. D. Wayne's great-grandbaby niece. Great-grand-niece. Okay. Pretty sure only Southerners do that. They, laterally move the grand situation. I think it's only grandchildren. In Hebrew, a father or a grandfather are both called father, so take that information for what you will. Speaking of Hebrew, I got some good news. I met a guy online. His name is the Friendly Atheist. Check him out. It's quite interesting. He's a guy, and he does a really good job of laying out the atheist ideals and the way that they think and the whole mentality of an atheist. He's quite an interesting character to listen to. So what I've decided to do, he's got a series called Everything Wrong with Genesis. It's 18 videos long, and each video is about 10 minutes long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebut those videos on the podcast. I'll play them right up here in the corner, right about here, in this area. And I'll stop it, and I'll address every point that he makes. Because this is 20 videos, 10 minutes long, of utter bullshit and completely misunderstanding every single word in the Bible, not to mention the fact that he's using the wrong Bible. So I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be challenging, and I'm going to tear his ass apart right here on this video, friendly and politely, but it's going to get done. And I think that's going to be a really cool series for me. And I hope you guys will enjoy it too. A reaction vid. Kind of. More like a correction vid. Because everything he says is wrong. I mean everything. His entire worldview is incorrect. I'm not talking about atheism. I'm talking about his understanding of the text. So, I'm not telling you to not be an atheist if that's your thing. You work that out between you and God. But even atheists know there's something going on, and you can't explain it with the crap that science teaches. So, you missed what I said? You were on the phone? Oh, I'm going to do a reaction video to a guy named the Friendly Atheist. He's got 20 videos. Each video is about 10 minutes long. And I'm going to play them, and I'm going to stop him every time he makes a point, and I'm going to correct that point. YouTube is toxic, and will devour it. But I'm not trying to be toxic. I'm trying to correct toxicity. I'm not going to be impolite. I'm not going to be immature or unprofessional. I'm not going to insult the guy's character or his intelligence, because he's quite an intelligent guy. He just got the wrong idea. I mean, he's very smart, and he put a lot of time and effort into his videos. He put a lot of research into it. He's just wrong. So I'm going to fix it, and hopefully that'll help us both. But I won't be attacking his character or his morality or even his belief system. I'm only going to correct the incorrect information. And that way, anybody looking for that kind of thing, including my own children, if they ever decide to watch my videos, they will have a good roadmap to actual science, lowercase s, and not the religion science, which is a cult, which started in the 1800s. And it's prolific, I assure you. Because there is real science. You're looking at it right behind me. This is a Chinese video, by the way. Notice the color of the soil. This is supposed to be a real video of an orbiting satellite orbiting the moon. The one up in the sky. The one you can see outside right now. It's not happening right now. It happened about 4 years ago or so. But the moon hadn't changed in that amount of time. So I want you to pay close attention to the color of this moon beneath me. And compare it to other videos you've seen of the moon and what your eyes see when you go outside and look up. There is a such thing as real science. Science is falsifiable. Science is coming up with a hypothesis and proving the negatives until you come up with a fact that you can't refute. And that is scientific. That's the method. It's test, repeat, test, peer review, test some more, present hypothesis. That's science. This other nonsense that they're teaching, evolution, the Big Bang Theory, dark energy, dark matter, quantum physics, string theory, all of these things are designed for one purpose, and that is to get rid of God out of this equation. Because what all of them avoid at every cost is the opportunity to say how life started. As close as they get is the Precambrian explosion, which is where life abundantly just appears on the earth in what they call the fossil record, which is also bullshit, because there's no place on earth that there is a fossil record. It's only in textbooks, like the tree of life. You know, that tree that has all the lines and has all the animals on it and shows how everybody's connected to everybody else. That's bullshit. It's not real. You agree? I thought you might. So, anyway, what my desire is to endeavor to create content that is factually correct, that you can go out and look for yourself and find evidence of the things I say. I'm debating right now whether or not just to say it or to show you that I'm right. Now, that could get boring, because then I'd have to go out and find all the videos and all of the things that I've learned in the past, all of the resources and all of the context of everything I'm saying, and then present it in a video form, which I could do, and it would take me a lot longer to do, because I'd have to get all that information together and then edit it into a video and then write a script that fits it. Or I could just tell you and you could either trust me or go look for yourself. I haven't decided which I'm going to do yet, because I realize that being the guy that I am and not a public figure on national television, you don't have any reason to trust what I'm saying unless you know me, and then you know that I've done the research and I'm not saying anything that's bullshit. But most people that watch these won't know me, so I'll figure out something. I don't want it to get boring and bogged down, though, and I don't want it to take forever. I mean, 20 videos at 10 minutes each is already going to take several months to get through. And anything I can do to shorten that up and make it snappier, I'm going to try to do that. Because I don't want the correct information to get lost in the details of proving that the information is correct, if you know what I'm saying. Oh, look, the moon is shining. No, it's not. See? It's a lighting effect. Okay. Now that I've told you what my plans are, hey, I see you over there. Now that I've told you what my plans are, you guys know what to look forward to in the next few months. Is there anything I can play for you? Anything you'd like to hear? Huh. It must be a dull life to not know you. Is that a sarcastic remark? There's lots of people that don't know me. Today is the anniversary of them walking on the moon. Well, I nailed that on the head. That was an accident. Sweet. I'm still trying to figure out how to take that last comment, Great Sky Troll. Are you saying I'm being arrogant by stating a fact? Or are you just earnestly saying it would be dull to not have a guy like me in your life? Because it's a double-edged sword. Yes, having me in your life is an amazing thing because I know things you'll never know. It's also incredibly arduous because I'm quite prickly and needy. You want to talk about boat people theory or multi-timeline theory? I can do that. I can add that in. And I don't have to do this every video. In fact, I was thinking about doing it only once a week. And then the other videos doing other things. Because I don't want it to get boring. I want it to be something you can look forward to and get something out of. Okay, I got you. I just didn't know how to take that. It's hard to read emotion on a text. It is true that most people in today's society, in today's climate, have no idea how to have a conversation or to delve into things that are beyond them, which is what I've done my whole life. For whatever reason, it's not that I was, drawn to it or anything. It just kind of worked out that way. But with everybody on Earth doing this 90% of the time, it's hard to engage. So I'm trying some new stuff. If you guys support me in it, that'll be great. What you think, Darlena? You think it'd be a good thing? Looking forward to fixing any questions you may have in Genesis, because the reason I decided to do this is this guy is not the only guy that thinks this way. A lot of people do, and I understand why, because Genesis is quite confusing. Because what you don't, here's the three tenets of why I believe this. Number one, the Bible is not chronological. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. And the main reason why most people think that it contradicts itself. Because they're expecting a story from start to finish, and that is not how the Bible is laid out at all. It goes back and forth. And it's also about one family. One of the things the guy mentions is that during the genealogy portion, the really boring part of the Bible, very few women are mentioned, and none of them by name. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because they're not talking about those people. It's not that they didn't exist. They were there. But it's about one bloodline, one family, from start to finish. And that gets lost because of all the stories that intermingle with that line, that through line that goes all the way through the Bible. There's lots of other people that interact with that one family. So this is a very hard thing for people to understand. That's the biggest thing. It's not chronological. It doesn't start, tell the story, have a final act, and then end. It goes back and forth. Number two, the Bible emphatically does not contradict itself. First thing you have to understand is that it wasn't written by one person. It was written by hundreds of people over a large period of time, something to the tune of about 8,000 years. Some people knew things that other people didn't know. Some people were privy to knowledge that other people didn't have. Some people were there eyewitnesses. Some people are getting it from hand-me-downs, like, say, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Most of those people that wrote those books were not there when Jesus was alive. This happened like 50 years after his death. Josephus, a Greek historian, did not ever know Jesus, but he did see him one time. But what he's writing about is the things that occurred in his atmosphere. They didn't have Twitter back then. They didn't have Google. What they had is word of mouth. And so the stories that were told were absolutely accurate. They had to be, or else you wouldn't get any correct information. That's not to say that conspiracy theories and myth and things like that didn't occur, but there's another problem here. A lot of the things that we call myth, that's only taught in this country. If you go to that country, they teach it as history because it happened. Like Greek mythology, we're the only people that teach Greek mythology as mythology. The Greeks think it happened. The Hindus think that their history, the Bhagavad Gita and all of that, it happened. The Norse mythology, the people from Norway and all that, they believe that shit. There's a reason they believe it, because that's their history. That's their perspective of what was going on back in those days. The Bible does very little to pull them all together, but there is evidence, and I'll point it out when we get to it, that those things were happening at the same time. And it depends on which perspective, depends on where you were in the world as to how you viewed it. And the third thing is, you have to read the whole Bible in order to understand any particular part of it. Genesis makes a lot of statements that it doesn't back up, but it backs it up later in the Bible. So, you love mythology? It's the largest part of your boat people theory. Yes, it is. And it has to do with the Phoenicians, and it goes even further back than that. And you're absolutely correct, and that is a real thing. It is not historical, because they didn't write it down for the most part. But if you look into the writings of King Tyrus and things that happened in Ur and in Mesopotamia around that period in time, you will find evidence of people who lived in boats, largely known as the Phoenicians. And if you want me to do a deep dive into that, I most certainly will, because it is part of history. And the multiple timeline theory thing is a theory. But I understand why people have it. And there are things that are interesting that happen on Earth that would make you think that something like that could occur. I'm not entirely sure that it can. The reason I'm not entirely sure that it can is because the only person that I'm aware of that is outside of time is God himself. He is outside of time and space and matter. He was there before he created those things, which is like a person looking down at a tabletop. Everything on the table is inside of the table, but you are outside of the table, but you're still part of the table because you're there. If that makes any sense. How do I know all this stuff? Because I study. I don't have a life. Because at a very early age, I discovered that people were largely telling me lies. And I wanted to know the truth of the reality of the world that I lived in, so I went looking for it. That's the only reason. I don't like being lied to. I don't like not understanding my surroundings. I don't like not knowing why things are the way they are, why they happen the way they happen. So I looked. After your head injury, you reread the Bible and all the myths, plus Eastern and island mythology, Polynesian and Rongo, which is Easter Island, and Australian. That would be the Aboriginals. Yes, all of those people came from somewhere. They didn't start where they ended up. They came from somewhere. The Easter Islanders were Polynesian, and they came from the mainland in search of new land and ended up on Easter Island. And then that civilization, because it was so remote and so far away from everyone else, kind of did its own thing for about 1,000 years, maybe a little longer. By the time the conquistadors got there, the Spanish explorers, by the time they found Easter Island, these people had already been through an entire civilization and were on the brink of destruction. They were going down. They were just about to, kill themselves, civilization explosion. And that eventually happened. I don't know whether they got on boats and left or they just finished fighting and killing each other off, but the people that live there now are also immigrants from other places that came later in the world. They're not the people that came from there, but those legends still exist, the Rongo and the Moai, the big statues and all of that, and how they got to where they are. Untranslated language, but it's absurdly developed for a primitive language. See, that's another problem I have with science. This idea of primitive man, cavemen, or that we started off dumb and simple-minded, just basically became men from monkeys, and then over time we progressively got better and progressively became the smartest thing that's ever lived. That's not true, okay? They knew things in the days that they built the pyramids that we will never figure out. They had ideas and knowledge that we do not possess today. They did things we cannot do today with modern technology. They were not primitive. No one has ever lived in a cave unless it just happened to be convenient. There was not a civilization of cavemen. Most of them lived in mud huts, or they lived in little villages. Once they started learning how to farm and be agriculturalists, they started learning how to grow food. They gathered into little sections, and then they started collecting land. And the moment land ownership became a thing, war became a thing. And that's why civilization is the way it is today. But there has never been a caveman, a person who dwells in a cave primarily. And like I said, unless they just found a cave and thought, hey, I don't have to build a house. Maybe that happened. But I'll give you a prime example of this. You're familiar with the Dark Ages. That's 400 years of complete and utter lack of technology. They lived by fire and candlelight. They lived in houses that didn't have electricity or running water. They went by horseback. The Dark Ages. The Dark Ages is 1,000 years after Roman civilization, where they built the Colosseums and stuff. In that civilization, they had running hot water that could go uphill into bathhouses. They had aquifers that could carry water across the plains, across the deserts, and into their cities. They had pipes. They had valves. They found a Roman valve that was made out of brass that you could take the Ace hardware today and set it on the shelf and people would walk right past it and not know that it was ancient, because it looks like it can do the exact same thing as a modern valve, because it is the exact same thing as a modern valve. That was 1,000 years before the Dark Ages. Why were there a Dark Ages? Because we had great wars and people died, and the people who survived didn't know how to do that shit. So they became Dark Ages again. And then they slowly figured out how to do it. And then they became enlightened. That's when the Bronze Age started. Read that a few are there. And one fellow went to school in the U.S., brought fruit trees, went home a botanist. You're talking about Easter Island still? Yeah, there probably are a few people that are straggling around that came from that civilization. I doubt they all died. I'm sure they got rescued and went other places and things like that. Aqueducts and aquifers are not the same thing. What did I say? Did I say aquifer instead of aqueduct? You knew what I meant. Damn it. My point is they had technology that they didn't have 1,000 years later. And that's happened over and over and over again throughout history. They built the pyramids and nobody today knows exactly how they did it. They can't do it today. There's not a machine on earth that can move those stones and put them that high up in the air from 500 miles away. That's what I'm doing, honey. This is my channel, and I am teaching. I'm trying anyway. This channel can be anything I want it to be because it's mine. If I want to play music today, I can do that. If I want to talk about the pyramids, I can do that, which coincidentally means fire in the middle. Wonder why that is. Yes, water can do some amazing things. And I believe that it played a large part in how they moved those stones from 500 miles away. So saith Plato. Oh, Pharaoh. Yeah. There's some interesting things going on in Egyptology too. The people that live in Egypt are not Egyptian. They're not the same people who built the pyramids. They inherited it or took it one way or the other. If you don't believe me, just look at the pictures depicted on the walls of Egyptian people, the people that were there when they built the pyramids, and look at the people who live in Egypt now and compare the two. They're not the same people. They were fair-skinned for the most part, and they no longer live there. I'll tell you why. Because they were all destroyed in a big thing called the flood. Now, before that, the pyramid, the Great Pyramid is the one we're talking about. There's 3 pyramids there on Giza, but there's only one that's of note, and that's the Great Pyramid. The other 2 were like imitations. Hey, I want one of those. Go build me a pyramid. So that's what the other 2 are. But the Great Pyramid, the big one, that was done for a specific reason. And nobody is telling you what that reason is. They say, and they swear by the fact that they were tombs. Well, if they are tombs, why were all of the pharaohs buried in the Valley of the Kings 6 miles away? I mean all of them, and their mothers, and their children, and their workers, and their guardsmen, and their generals, all buried in the Valley of the Kings. All of them. Every single one of them. There's never been a body found in a pyramid. Ever. Not one on any continent. And there are pyramids on just about every continent. All built at about the same time. Well, in the Bible talks about a guy named Joseph who built storehouses for a pharaoh. And that pharaoh was the 18th dynasty pharaoh. That's when this all started, in the 18th dynasty. The 19th dynasty was Akhenaten, which interestingly enough was a pharaoh who believed in one true God, and all the other gods were fake. and he moved his capital from Memphis to Amarna, which is in the middle of the desert, quite a ways away, and built a new capital city that worshiped one God from heaven, the Most High God. It's the same God we worship. His name was Amun, and he changed it to Akhenaten. Amun is a god that the Egyptians worship. Aten means the Most High. His son was Tutankhamun, whose name was briefly changed to Tutankhaten, which means son of the Most High God. Well, they destroyed, when they killed Akhenaten, and they destroyed his capital city, and they wiped his face off of all of the hieroglyphics and all of the depictions, they tried to erase his existence, and they hid his body. They closed his tomb in. He was also buried in the Valley of the Kings, but they sealed his tomb off, and his son's tomb wasn't his son's tomb. There's some weirdness about Tutankhamun's tomb. It was way too small to be a pharaoh's tomb, but it's because they rushed, because they killed him, and his tomb wasn't ready. So they buried him what they think is his mother's tomb, which is a much smaller place, and they sealed it off and was never supposed to be found. Only one archaeologist found it, and that's why we know about it. But we didn't know about it for a long time. Why didn't we know about that pharaoh? Because he was trying to teach Egypt that there is a God, and they're worshiping the wrong one. Why did he do that? Because he came along in the 19th dynasty, which is the next dynasty after Moses left Egypt, and all of those plagues happened, and that whole army was murdered in the sea crossing. The whole thing, the Pharaoh and his whole army, were killed when the sea came down on top of them after Moses and his people crossed the Red Sea. So the very next Pharaoh tried to correct for his mistakes. And then the pharaohs after that tried to erase him because they wanted to go back to the old ways. Well, during his reign, he inherited things that were built by a guy that the Egyptians call Imhotep. Imhotep was a grand architect, and he was the first guy to ever introduce medical knowledge to the world. He was the first doctor, even before Hippocrates. And the Romans actually worshipped Imhotep for 3,000 years after his death, and they learned a lot from his exploits. He was a very good architect, and he was a very good medical person, and he knew a lot of things, and he was second only to the Pharaoh. But he started out as a prisoner. Does this sound familiar? And the Pharaoh had a dream that he couldn't understand, and Imhotep did understand it, so the Pharaoh sent for him and said, I will give you half of my kingdom if you can tell me what these dreams mean. They were quite perplexing dreams. So Imhotep told him, and he did give him half of his kingdom. Imhotep was second only to the Pharaoh. He had a ring that gave him total authority. Does this story sound familiar? Because it's the exact same story about Joseph. You know, the coat of many colors and being sold into slavery and interpreting dreams for the Pharaoh and becoming second only to the Pharaoh. Imhotep is the guy who built the pyramids. The step pyramid. He built the storehouses. You can find deep pits in Egypt right now, which were once grain silos. Those were the great storehouses for the famine. And the pyramid is a pillar erected to God, mentioned in the Bible. And if you look at the dimensions of the pyramid and everything about it, every quality about it, it tells the story of Christianity. It's got a pit and a king's chamber. There's a wide shaft going down to the pit and a little narrow. You have to get on your hands and knees and crawl upwards to the king chamber. You open up into what's called a grand gallery, which has 126 steps up to the king's chamber, which has an empty tomb in it. The pyramid was built, it had 144,000 casing stones around it, so tight you couldn't even see the joints, let alone put a piece of paper in between them. The capstone was solid gold, but it was never placed. It was never put on top. The pyramid was never finished on purpose. The dimensions of the pyramid are exact half of the dimensions of the earth. It is the northern hemisphere of the earth. If you take two pyramids and put them bottom to bottom, you get the dimensions of the world. The location of the Great Pyramid is in the exact center of the landmass of earth, within half of an inch of true north. That is astronomically hard to do, and even harder to do without modern technology. The Earth Mound are Nido. Yes, they are. Shiva Ingham. I don't know much about Shiva other than she was a queen, and that she briefly had an affair with one of David's sons, who was also a king, and they had a child. I may be saying that wrong. I think you're saying it right. I have to look into that. I don't remember there being two names associated with Shiva, but she was the queen of Ethiopia. And she dated Solomon. Solomon sent her great gifts and brought her to his kingdom, and she was so impressed with him that she stayed a week there and learned everything she could learn from him. And while they were there, they had sex, and she got pregnant. And when she went home, she gave birth to a son who later came back in his 20s back to Solomon to meet his father. And some people think that's why the Philippines have a church that claimed to have the Ark of the Covenant in it, because of that. Those people think that Solomon gave his son the Ark of the Covenant and took it back to where he's from. That's not true, of course. The Ark of the Covenant is where the Bible says it is, in Jeremiah's grotto, hidden. And it'll be there until somebody can dig it out and prove it to the world. I've actually seen evidence that it exists, so I know that it's there. It's in Jerusalem. It never left. It's like Silvalingam, maybe. I don't know. I have to look into that. That's one I'm not that familiar with. I just know the legends of it. So, when you see the word Imhotep, that translates roughly to Joseph. And you know that that story is the same story that's in the Bible about the storehouses and the famine and all that. That was right before all of the stuff that happened with the Pharaoh later on that met up with Moses. Now, here's the thing that most people don't understand about the Bible. Moses was a prince. The woman who drew him from the waters and gave him the name Moses, which means drawn from the waters, was the Pharaoh's daughter. That boy was raised and educated as a prince. He lived in the palace with the Pharaoh. He had an education from the Pharaoh's teachers and all of that. So when Moses went back to his people, it was some great sacrifice for him to give up all that he had in Egypt, because he was one of them. That's something a lot of people don't realize. I mean, they know the story, but they don't really realize he was royalty. Here's another thing they don't realize. Mary was royalty also. Mary, the mother of Jesus, her father was a king. A lot of people don't know that. They think of her as a peasant that came from Nazareth. Nothing good comes from Nazareth. She slept outside in a manger because it was cold. Yeah, all those things happened, but she was of royalty. So when you re-examine that nativity story, think about what you're telling yourself. You're talking about a princess. I don't know if she accepted that. I don't know if she lived like that, but she was, in fact, a princess. Her father was Heli, the king. Her mother was a full-blooded priestess from the Levite tribe. So you got the full-blooded Levi and the full-blooded Judah tribe, the lion, and their offspring is perfect in DNA. Full-blooded priest, full-blooded king. That's why God found favor in her. Not because she was a hottie, but because she had pure DNA. And that's why Jesus was given to her. Interesting, huh? You all heard it said, and it's Indian. Indian. You've only heard it said, it's Indian. Yep. I'll give you that. What is the ark? The Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark that Noah was on? Which one are you referring to? Ark is a vessel. It's a box. That's what the word means, ark. It's a box, like a hope chest or a chest of drawers. Only in this case, it held specific items in the origin of the Ark of the Covenant. And if you're talking about the ark that Noah was on, it held all of the life that survived the flood. But it was basically just a box. It floated. You're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Okay. The Ark of the Covenant was built for a specific purpose. That was to be the mercy seat, which is the throne that God sat on when he came to earth. That's why it was placed in the Holy of Holies. That's why only the highest priest could go in, and only under certain rituals of cleanliness could he go in after sacrificing and atoning for all of his sins and wearing a breastplate of armor and all of that stuff and walk into the Holy of Holies. It was a seat. And on that seat, God would come down and sit and be with man. Inside of that seat was a container. Now, there's a lot of speculation, but as far as I can tell, what it held was the original tablets of the Ten Commandments, a bowl that was used to pick up manna from the 40 years in the desert when God fed manna to the men, and a stick that was carried by Moses, which was budding. It was a staff that was dead that was budding. So those three things are in the Ark of the Covenant as proof that these things occurred to the Israelites who would come to the tabernacle to worship God. That's the purpose of the mercy seat, the Ark of the Covenant. And only the Levites were charged with carrying it around. Anyone else who touched it would die. Why? Because that's what God said. I don't know that it had any more power than that, just because God said don't touch it. Can't be touched by human hands, except for the Levites. The Levites were the priests of the 12 tribes. There were 12 tribes from Abraham. Abraham had 12 sons. They each had a nation worth of children. And that's where all the people come from today. And they used to all congregate, 12 tribes, in the desert around a tabernacle, which was built on the spot. There were nomadic people. They traveled all around, so they carried the tabernacle with them like a tent. So they set it up. All the 12 tribes would come together, and they would have what we would call church. That was probably a little more sophisticated than that back then. They did sacrifices and all that, but that's where they would gather. And inside of that tabernacle was a main room, and inside of that room was a small room in the center of the tabernacle called the Holy of Holies, which is the place where God would come. And no one was allowed in that spot. It is the most pure place on earth, metaphorical. You had to be very special to go into that room, and several people tried and failed miserably and to the tune of their own death. But if you did it right and you followed all of the procedures, you got to remember that the Jews were to be a peculiar people. They're supposed to be weird. They're supposed to have all kinds of rituals and things that other people don't do, like us. No, you're not supposed to follow all of their rules. Atheists like to point to the fact that God doesn't like two different fabrics put together, like cotton and wool. That's a sin. No, it's not a sin, but it is a rule, and it's a rule that he gave to the Israelites because they're to be peculiar. They're to be hasty in the middle of the night and observe all of the high days and holidays and do Passover and all that stuff. They're supposed to follow all those Hasidic rules and be very orthodox in their Jewishness. Normal people are not supposed to do that. Just them. And that's something a lot of atheists don't understand. They don't understand the complexity of why the Israelites are who they are. And they are but one of the tribes of the 12 that we were talking about. Real Jews. There's a lot of people that call themselves Jews. A lot of people. They're not real Jews. They're not descendants of Judah. Only the descendants of Judah are Jews. There were 12 tribes. They all had different names. Judah was just one of them, and it was the lion. That was their insignia. There's preaching in that too. You can think about the lion and what it means. Think about the Sphinx that was built right in front of the pyramids, which once had a lion's head, because it was a lion, and it was facing the constellation Leo at the time. You can find that out if you look at up ancient star maps and go back 2,400 years. You'll see that when it was built, it was facing the constellation Leo. That's a clock. That's a date. That gives you an exact moment that thing was put there, so you know when it happened. Because, you know, the stars move over time. So it's not exactly looking at Leo anymore, but you can turn the clock back to when Leo was right there in front of it, and you know when that occurred. That's also right before the flood. Now, those Phoenicians that you like to think about, Great Sky Troll, occurred shortly after the flood. This was after the people had scattered. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They all went in different directions, and Moses went home. He went back to the place where Egypt is now, and Mesopotamia on the other side of the sea. You can see, they landed at the mountains of Ararat, not Mount Ararat, the mountains of Ararat. There's a big place in Turkey where there's several mountain ranges. Those are the mountains of Ararat, and you can find it on a map. And you can draw a straight line from the mountains of Ararat to Egypt, and you can see how they traveled back home. When you go on that line is Göbekli Tepe, because right after they survived the flood, they built Göbekli Tepe. That was, some people think 12,000 years ago. I think it was more like 8,000 years ago, but I don't have any proof of that, so that's just my opinion. And also you can find other dates and things that happen. Hey, April, what's happening? We're having a powwow. Sorry for being late. Work, etc. Forgive me, please, Jake. You don't have to beg. You're forgiven. So, when they got back, when you get back to Egypt from that straight line, you can see that on both sides of the Red Sea, there's civilizations that pop up. On this side, you got Giza and Memphis and Amarna and all those places, and on this side you got Ur and Mesopotamia and all of these places. And on both sides there were great kings and great civilizations that sprang up after that event. And you can see how they spread out across the world in those directions. Now, you love to talk about the Bible. This is an awesome, and watch this video too, because I've missed almost the whole thing. Well, go back and watch it afterwards. One thing I'll tell you that you didn't catch is that I'm about to start a series where there's this guy on the internet called the Friendly Atheist. He's put out a series called Everything Wrong with Genesis, and he talks about it from an atheist perspective. I'm going to go through his videos and rebut every point he makes and give him the correct information on this podcast. So that's going to be a great series coming up, and I'm going to entitle it Everything Wrong with Genesis. I think. I might. I don't know. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Ham, one of the 3 sons of Noah, went towards Africa. Shem went to the Middle Eastern areas, over towards China. He went that direction. And Japheth went over the Caucasus Mountains towards Europe and Eurasia and England and Scotland and all those places. And Moses went home down towards Egypt. And all of their children spread out from those prospective areas and continued spreading out. And if you'll draw a big cross right there from Egypt or from Turkey or from that area, you'll see that every single ancient building is on one of those lines. Every single civilization that sprang up that was a great civilization, civilizations that built in stone, that had the big monuments and all that, Belbak and Lebanon and all of those places. And over here you got Quetzalcoatl's area with Sacsayhuaman and Lake Titicaca and all of those places over here. Down you got Australia straight down, but you've got Ur and Mesopotamia and Egypt and all of the places that's down the Nile, down the Red Sea area. And up here you got all the African continents and all of the places like the Congo, and there were great buildings in Africa. Africa gets a bad rap, and they're not very much talked about, all of their old civilizations, but they were there. Trust me, On one of those lines, the one that goes that way over the Caucasus Mountains, there's an area called Italy. And in that area, that general vicinity, there were a group of people that called themselves something. I don't know what they called themselves. But other people called them the Phoenicians, because what they would do is they would show up at ports and trade and then go back out to sea. Nobody actually knew where they came from, but they were called the Phoenicians. You can look into stories about Prester John and stories about great civilizations like El Dorado and things like that. All of those things are connected to the Phoenicians because nobody actually knows where they came from. Those are the boat people that you like to talk about. And they were prolific. They were in California. They were in Australia. They were in South America. They were in China. They were in the mainland over in Europe. They were everywhere. There's evidence of them being everywhere. Canada. So yes, for a long time, those people did survive mainly by sea. And you could even say that they might have been Polynesian. I don't know. Nobody actually does know. That's why they don't talk about it a whole lot. They may have been what eventually became the people of Australia, the Aboriginals. Did you know that there's Aboriginals in South America also? And at one time, all of the continents were one landmass. This was before the flood. The flood actually separated all the land masses. But at one time, they were all one place, one big place. What science likes to call, do you know it? I'm asking, do you know it, because I forgot. You know, the big singular landmass. You know the one I'm talking about. Anyway, love the background, because yes, that's the moon. That's the Chinese moon, by the way. This was taken from the Chinese effort to go to the moon, their space program, about 4 years ago or so. And they took a satellite that orbited the moon, and they took this footage. It's interesting that the Chinese moon is a lot browner than I remember it being from the American moon. And smaller in size. If you see that little curve right there, let's see if I can get it right. See this curve? If you took that curve and drew it on a piece of paper and drew it out, you could get the actual circumference of that moon. It's a whole lot smaller than the one we visited. Yuck. Give me something else, Great Sky Troll. I'm running dry, buddy. Thank you. Thus and so, the world began. Again, a second time. Here's the crux of why atheists are atheists. Because they think a mean, hateful God loves torture and destroying things. They think that God destroyed the world because he wanted to. Yes, ma'am, a pipe. This is what happens when you run out of cigarettes. It's called recycling. So, they think that God destroyed the world because he wanted to. He did not. He destroyed the world because he had to. Because the whole world, animal and man alike, were corrupt. Why were they corrupt? Because the fallen angels had started doing unspeakable things with animals and man. Things that God didn't design man to do. There were men of old, men of renown. Those men are the men that are mentioned in the Greek mythologies. Titan and Hercules and Damocles and all those people. Those were the men of renown, the giants that were in the earth in those days. What's in the pipe? Tobacco. So, what happened was, a third, if you take, there's 3/3 in 100. 33 and a third, 33 and a third, 33 and a third makes 100. A third, that's 2 to 1 of God's angels, fell to earth. They left their habitation. They left where they were from, their estate in heaven, and came to earth. Now, I don't know exactly how they do that, but somehow that action gives them a physical body, because they were able then to mate with women. That's where they started. That's not where they ended up. They started with women. They also mated with animals. The thing, if you got to know about a spiritual body, if on earth needs a body, but it does not matter what kind of body. This is proven when Jesus cast the demons into the swine. I'm just saying it in an obvious format. A spirit from that realm needs a body, but it does not matter what kind of body. It just needs any kind of body, which is why AI is such a bad problem coming up here in the near future. Us, being human beings, also, our spirits need a body, but we can only inhabit a flesh body, this kind of body, which is why God formed us from the dust of the ground and put our spirit into this body. When God said, let us make man in our image, who does he keep talking to, the Friendly Atheist says? Well, he was talking to us, because we were there, in spirit form. And so were all the angels, and everything else that he created before he created the earth. And then he made man, and he put that spirit into man. And then man has to live through this world and die but once and go back to the Father who gave it. There the clay pot breaks, silver cord parts, and you go back to the Father. That's how that works. Angels do not have that problem. They can inhabit any body. All they have to do is go get it, or make it, or have it made. Which is why they inhabited so many things on the earth, like animals and man, and they were doing unspeakable things, playing with DNA and playing with bloodlines and trying to really corrupt God's creation. That's the devil's main job, is to corrupt God's creation. And it had become so corrupt that it grieved God's heart. He was so disappointed in his creation that he wanted to wipe it off the face of the earth and start over. He looked through the whole of the earth and he found one family that had not been touched by that corruption. One family that hadn't interbred with angels. And that was Moses and his 3 sons. That's not saying his 3 wives, his sons' wives were clean. Nobody ever mentions that. But his sons were, and he was. Just so happens that he's part of that singular bloodline that started with Adam. He's in that bloodline. So he's one of the descendants of the 12 tribes of Abraham. Thus continuing the story of one family from start to finish. So he charged Moses with saving the world because he was the only family that was not corrupt out of the whole world. He was the only pure-blooded human being left. And that's when God chose to destroy the world. And he told Noah to build an ark. And him and his sons got busy and they built the ark. And then he said all the animals that are going to survive will come to you, and they did. And then they all got on the ark. And here's an interesting thing. God didn't say that he shut them up in the ark. God said he closed the door from within. That means God was in the ark with them. It's the only way he could have pulled the doors in to close it. He sealed it from the inside out. The atheists like to say, well, how come they didn't save everybody else? Well, he tried. The whole time they were building the ark, Noah was preaching and telling people there's a flood coming, and they laughed at him. The Bible says that in those days there will come scoffers, people who are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood, people who want to believe there's no God, and they will scoff and laugh at you. That's what they were doing. Noah tried to get them in the ark. He told them, come, we're building an ark. You can join us. Nah, we don't need your ark. It hadn't ever rained here. What makes you think it's going to rain now? Well, when it started raining, that's when they started knocking on the ark, saying, let me in, we're going to die out here. Too late now. God already shut the ark from the inside. There ain't no opening that door. So they all perished. Atheists say, so God was the only person who had a flotation device? They couldn't have other people had boats? Yes, they could have. But it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and there was water on the earth for over a year. It only takes 2 weeks to starve to death. I assure you, flotation device or not, unless you had prepared like Noah did, you're going to die. So, that's what happened. And then the waters receded. The land masses buckled and fell, and great mountains rose up and great valleys fell down, and the waters receded into the low places, and the continents emerged, and they got off the boat and started civilization all over again, along with the animals that they had saved. And they brought, atheists say, well, he said bring them 2 male and female pairs each. And then the next verse it says bring 7 of everything unclean and 7 of everything clean. Which is it? Is it 2 or is it 7? It was 2 by 2, male and female, but they had to make sacrifices, and some animals eat meat, so they had to bring extra clean and unclean animals for certain reasons. But the main bloodlines were 2 by 2, male and female. The ones that they brought that were 7 of everything clean and unclean, they were duplicate copies. Well, how could you fit all the animals in the world? There's over 8 million species of animal. The word species did not exist at that time. They used the word kind. And from one kind of dog, you can get 800 types of dog, species of dog, out of one kind. If you look at a horse and a zebra and a mule, a 3-year-old can tell you that they're the same kind of animal. They're different species, but they're the same thing, right? So, you only need about 8,000, and you don't have to take the grown ones. You can take the babies, and you kind of want to because they need to grow up after the flood and mate and have babies. So they need to be young. And from those types of animals, for example, you could take a canis animal, a type of dog, and from that dog you can make all the other types of dogs. This has been proven in the German trials where they tried to backbreed a silver fox by using a red fox. And they did that. And they proved you can get all kinds of foxes out of one set of foxes. Yes, some of them got eaten, some of them got sacrificed for whatever reason, who knows. Why else would you bring unclean animals? Unclean means corrupted, or it means scavenger. Also, you need some unclean animals to scavenge, to pick up dead things. You know, that's the purpose of a scavenger, is to keep the earth clean. It's a self-cleaning, self-renewing system. So you need scavengers. You didn't need to take fish or insects because they can survive just fine in a flood. You don't need to take all the plants unless you're going to eat them, because plants survive floods quite fine. So yes, not only is the ark story very real and did happen, it's not mythologically enhanced at all. There's no lying in it. There are 133 flood stories from all over the world, different people who never even knew the other people existed. They all say the same thing. Somebody in a boat saved the world after a worldwide flood. Well, why did it have to be a worldwide flood, atheists say? Couldn't it have been a local flood and they just didn't know any better? Because how could they possibly know the whole world was flooded unless they went everywhere and found out? They couldn't know that the world was flooded. Number one, if it was a local flood, they could have moved. They didn't have to build an ark. Number two, God said the whole world would be destroyed, and it was. Number three, there were no mountains in those days like we have today, like the Himalayas and the Andes and, the big mountain, the one everybody climbs. I can't think of it right now. The Rockies. None of those mountains existed at the time. The biggest mountain in those days were like Mount Sinai, which is just a glorified hill. The reason mountains exist today is because the great deep broke open. If you look at a map, you'll see that on both sides of the main land masses, there is a trench in the middle of the ocean. Ours is called the Marianas Trench. There's another one on the other side. If you drained all the water out, the earth looks like a baseball. It's got a seam all the way around both sides. Right? That's where the water from the deep spurted out and it split open. Now, if you look at that trench and go back towards the land, you'll notice that inland there's a mountain range. Everywhere there's a trench, there's a mountain range. Because when it broke open, it pushed the world back like that. And the mountains buckled up. It's like pushing flat land into a mountain. That's why we have a mountain range and a trench. It's like high place, low place. Beach, right in the middle. That's why they exist. That's why they're there. In some places, like the Ring of Fire, there's a line of volcanoes that are still on that spot where the Great Deep broke open. And the magma came up under the water. And it's still coming up to this day. What we call in science the continental drift. First of all, continents are not lily pads. They don't float around in the ocean. What's under the ocean is dirt. The land is connected. But what we call continental drift is the actual earth being split open and pushed apart. And it didn't happen over millions of years. It happened in about a week during the flood. Places like the Grand Canyon were carved out because the water receded, and it's a spillway. The Grand Canyon has a delta where you can see where the water came from the high place and went down into the ocean. And while it was going, it carved that canyon. That canyon was at the most 2 or 3 weeks it took to carve that canyon. Probably happened in a few minutes. There's proof of that because when Mount St. Helens blew, what came off of Mount St. Helens carved a mini Grand Canyon overnight. It wasn't there, and then it was there. That's how fast it happened. And it's a deep canyon. It's not as big as the Grand Canyon, but it's enough that proves this can happen quickly. All of the layers that people talk about, if they're millions of years old, where did all that stuff come from? Is it falling from outer space? Where's all that material coming from that forms layers over millions of years? The Earth that's here has always been here. Those layers, that's called liquefaction. And what happens is, if you take a jar and fill it up with dirt of all different kinds, gravel and sand and dirt and peat and all kinds of stuff, and then fill it the rest of the way up with water, and then shake it violently and turn it upside down and set it down, you can watch that, all that dirt will layer itself into layers, and it'll go from heavy to light. This is exactly what happened on the earth. It's called liquefaction, and it happens during a flood. Also, if those are millions of years per layer, how do you explain polystrate fossils, which are like trees that are standing straight up through all the layers? Are you saying that a tree stood there for millions of years while the earth filled in around it? No. That's not possible. How come you can find closed clamshells on the top of one of those giant mountains that we're talking about, the one that I can't remember? You know, the big one that everybody climbs up and dies on the way up. You know which one I'm talking about. You can find closed clamshells. When clams die, they open. But these are closed, and they're on the top of that mountain. And they weren't brought there. They're everywhere. They're all over the world. That's where fossils come from, the flood. Because animals die every day. You go to any place, any farm, and find a dead animal, and then come back in a month and see if it's fossilized yet. Come back in a year and see if it's fossilized yet. What you're going to find out is that scavengers will eat it and it will disappear, and there will be no proof that it was ever there. That's not how a fossil is made. A fossil is made by covering a live animal with mineral-rich sediment and suffocating it from the oxygen, keeping it from decaying. And those minerals will eventually eat the bone and replace it. A fossil is not a bone, it's a rock. But it used to be a bone. But that bone is eaten by minerals, and the minerals take the shape of what the bone left when it was eaten. That's where the fossil record comes from. Duh, figured so, but just checking. Yep. My nose itches. So, you guys can look forward to more of this in detail when I do a little bit of research and put together my rebuttal for the Friendly Atheist's videos, who is a very smart man, and he took a long time to put his videos together. He put a lot of work into them, and I'm going to immensely enjoy tearing his theories apart and setting them correct. And maybe we can save his soul. That'd be good. Or maybe not. Either way, what you can count on is that I'm going to attack his ideas and correct them. What I'm not going to do is attack his character or his intelligence or his personality or anything like that. I'm going to remain professional. I'm going to do the job, which is correct the information. This is not about downing the friendly atheist. This is about downing his ideas that he's spreading out across the world. So I don't know how he's going to respond, but I've gotten permission to do it from him, so we'll see how he responds. But that's my position. I'm not here to assassinate his character. I'm just here to assassinate his ideas. And I hope that we can have a professional relationship going forward, and maybe I'll do it again later on with another one of his series. But he's got 20 videos, and each video is about 10 minutes long in this series called Everything Wrong with Genesis. And starting in a couple of weeks, it's going to take me a little time to put it together, but in a couple of weeks I'm going to start at least one video a week. I'm not going to do it every podcast because that'll get old, but at least one video a week. I will start out and I'll take maybe 3 of his videos and put them together, and then I'll go through them. I'll play them right up here in the corner, and I'll stop them and correct what he's saying and show you where I corrected it, why it's wrong. And I think that's going to be enjoyable for all of us. Maybe that is my true calling. Who knows? We'll see. If you're just coming in here, if you find this video on the internet, please support it by liking, subscribing, and sharing, and hitting that bell button so you get all the notifications, and spread it around, spread the word. Maybe we can get a ministry started here. Let's correct all the bullshit ministry. That's a good one. And also, if you want to help me out, you can follow one of the links in the description below. Or if you want to buy me a pack of smokes, paypal.me/JakeJohnsonBand. Otherwise, I'll just keep smoking the old pipe here. And let's get this thing started. Let's get some friends together and get a community of people who want to know the reality of the world we live in, because that's what we're trying to do here. So what I'm trying to do ultimately is understand where my feet are. Understand why I'm on this planet. Understand what the meaning of all of this is and what the bigger meanings are for things that I don't understand. That's the whole reason I delve into anything. That's the whole reason I know anything, is because I'm curious. I want to know. Maybe you want to know. So join me as I take this journey into insanity and find my way back to reality. During this process, if you have a curiosity, like Great Sky Troll wants to talk about the boat people and he wants to talk about multiple timeline theory, I can interject these ideas in between what I'm doing, and we can do deep dives on any subject you're interested in, because that's my purpose for this right now, is to answer your questions and to answer mine. So if you have one, spit it out and I'll do a deep dive on it, and we'll see if we can't come up with some knowledge. Knowledge is wonderful. You would, but I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to anybody who's watching this video. And I was half joking. I believe so. You feel it too. You feel what? God surely is proud of you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope so. I'm trying. I never could understand the Bible, so this helps. Good. I'm going to try to make it as clear and as unconfusing as possible. Thank you. I love the way you explain things and you tell it with such wise enthusiasm. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is your calling. It may be. I don't know. I hope it is. I always told the Lord that if he wanted me to be a preacher, to tell me and make it where I couldn't avoid it, and I'd go and do it. But he never did, so I never did. So maybe this is it. Yes, you're blessed. Your family is blessed, and thanks. Know you have angels watching you. Maybe. I wouldn't put it past them. They're here all over the place. Kevin has an, wait for it. I'm waiting for it. Wait for it. All right, I'm out. This is a ministry. It's a weird ministry because I'm not preaching, but it is a ministry, and I'm hoping to start one up that will last. I'm hoping that a couple of hundred videos down the road, we have a big following and that we get lots of people involved and wanting to know what's up. I'm not special in any way. I just spent a lot of time reading. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to understand everything. So you will understand why I spend so much time talking. He has a question. Well, let's hear it. What's the question? W-A question. Suggestion? I don't know what you're saying there. This is Kevin. I have 3 questions. Was the moon landing real? Who killed JFK? And are there really aliens? No, the moon landing was not real. I do not doubt that we went to the moon, but what you saw on national television was absolutely fabricated. Who killed JFK? Are you ready for this? Lyndon Baines Johnson. Are there really aliens? No. Satisfactory? Or do you want me to get into it? Will there be college football? There will always be college football. Come on, man. There's college football right now. They're just not televising it. Any other questions? Okay, maybe that explains. Maybe I need a little. All right. The Russians put up a satellite called Sputnik, and it scared the shit out of the United States because they thought that they could spy on us from space. And if they can spy on us, then they can shoot us from space. So it became a big dick measuring contest to who can get there first, which we were beaten hands down by Russia several times. They got the first man in space, they got the first woman in space, they got the first dog in space, they got the first satellite in space. But we, on first attempt, 9 years after deciding to do so, went to the moon and back 6 times, and never again after that. Every single picture that was taken was magazine quality, magazine cover quality, and no one got hurt for any reason ever, except for the 3 astronauts who were going to tell how rickety the spacecraft was on the news. They died in a massive fire just before they could spill the beans. But other than that, everybody survived, and we made it very successfully to the moon and back, and it was televised, and they made a phone call to Richard Nixon from the surface of the moon, despite not having carried anything large enough to send that kind of signal to the Earth from the moon, and it was not delayed in any way, and it was very clear, and he made a landline phone call to the moon. No, it wasn't real. It was all propaganda. It was all a hoax to win the space race and to ensure America's future above Russia, who at that time we thought was a superpower. Turns out they were a paper tiger and didn't have nearly what they thought they had or what we thought they had. But at the time, they were scary. The Red Scare and all. So I don't doubt that we went to the moon. I don't doubt that NASA could possibly do that. I can't prove it because what they showed us was filmed in a studio in Area 51. You can go there today in the desert and find the exact spot where they filmed it at, and it looks exactly like the moon. Even the hills in the background are there. There's pictures of it on the internet. Sorry, it's not real. Bad as you want it to be. I've heard this was one of the Secret Service. It may have been one of the Secret Service, but Johnson ordered it. He ordered it on the tarmac as they came in to that area into Dallas. Then he forced, after they took the body to the cemetery, to the hospital, and they found that bullet laying on the gurney, and they said that was the bullet that killed him. Then he forced his wife to stand beside him and support him as he was inaugurated on the aircraft on the tarmac before they left Dallas as president. The reason he was killed was because he was going against the Federal Reserve. What he wanted to do was get us back on the gold standard, which at that time we were on the petrodollar. The gold standard is where we started, where a quarter was worth that much gold, and a dollar was worth that much gold. And there was gold in Fort Knox to back up the money that we had. Then we were switched to the petrodollar, which is all about oil, and which is why we've been in never-ending wars since that period in time. Over in the Middle East, it's about acquisition of oil. He was also going to out some secret societies, but mostly he was trying to get us back on the gold standard. Every time a president goes against the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserves anything, they get assassinated. Every time. It even happened to Abraham Lincoln. So yes, Johnson ordered the hit on Kennedy, and probably somebody in the Secret Service carried it out. Lee Harvey Oswald may have even been involved. I doubt it. I think he was a patsy. I think he was just like some of the school shooters. He was set up to do a job that he thought he was doing something good for somebody, and he ended up getting the full end of the law on him, and he was the patsy. But there were more than one shot. There was more than one shooter. That's been evidenced, obvious. People have delved into it. You can read books about it. You can see all of the different conspiracy theories and all. But the truth of the matter is, he was trying to get us in a position that everybody else, the establishment, the deep state, wanted something else. And so they said he had to go. Kevin said he got you going, but I learned something new. Well, that's good. I'm not really going. I'm just pulling shit off the top of my head that I remember from trying to answer your question and do it in a coherent way. What else you got? Aliens. Oh, yeah. There are no aliens. If there are, they have never been here. How do I know that? Because space travel is hard. And as we know by trying it ourselves, if you're going to build a craft that can traverse the whole of space from wherever you're from to come here within your lifetime to make it even a viable trip, then it would take the whole of the world you live in to come together as one. You would have to solve all of your problems racially. You would have to solve all of your problems as to leadership and all of that stuff, religion, the whole 9 yards. Everybody'd have to live in harmony. The whole world would have to pitch in to build this craft. All of your resources would be involved because it's the biggest undertaking of that world. And then you'd have to come here across the vast expanses of space to wherever we are to crash or to probe some rednecks' asses. I don't think so. Are there entities that we don't recognize or understand lurking about in the world? Yes, there are. Will there be an invasion? More than likely. But they are not aliens. Anything that is not of God is of the devil. Furthermore, God created this place for us. It's a special place. It was designed to be inhabited. Everything else is just to show the wonder of God. The whole of the universe, the creation of all the stars that are so far out that we will never, ever, ever be able to see them, was summed up in one line in the Bible. One word, one line, or three or four words, one line. He made the stars also. That's it. That is the only explanation there is for them. He made the stars also to show the wonder of God, for signs and seasons, that sort of thing. That's it. There's nothing out there. Everything out there is dead. Everything in here is alive. The world is a closed system. You cannot leave it. There is nothing to leave to go to. So you understand, if space is a vacuum and we live in an atmosphere, if you poke a hole in the atmosphere, the vacuum will equalize that space, sucking all of the oxygen into space to try and equalize it, because that's the nature of vacuums. No one has ever left the earth. Sorry, it's not possible. If you don't believe me, get a balloon, take a needle, poke a hole in it, and see what happens. Doing great. Thank you. I know God does not know them. It's in the book of Enoch. Yes, the book of Enoch is a very important book. So is the book of Jasher and several other books. This is Kevin. These are alien entities. They were crimson and white and yell, "Go Bama!" a lot. They must be destroyed. I think you're just joshing me. There are entities, there are things that lurk just behind the veil that are peeking and trying to get into this realm. They are not aliens. They are demonic. There are things out there that will come here eventually. It's in the Bible. But they're not aliens. They may say they're aliens because they want you to buy into what they're telling you. They want you to believe in them and not God. But they are not aliens. They are demonic. They are of Satan, the fallen angel. I can tell you later about those. That's fine. I didn't want to tell you anyway. He's just joking with me. Or he's talking about something he understands that I don't. One of the two. However, that would be a trick. Amen, sister. So what do you think? What do you think of this format? You guys think this is a good deal? I noticed that Great Sky Troll dipped out. Are you still here, buddy? Are you into this, or is this above your pay grade? Talk to me. Tell me something. Make me feel alive. The other books, you mean? Yes, they are very important books. They're even referred to by Jesus himself several times. They're not biblical, but they are important books, and they were written by the same people who wrote the Bible. You don't need to know anything that's in any of those books to understand the Bible. But if you want a deeper understanding of the world, read those books. There's some good information in them. He's a fruitcake. I'm glad you have, and I hope that you enjoy what I'm going to do later even more, because I'm going to add visual aids. And I'm going to try to do a good job at it and try to give you all the information you want. And I'm going to try, because I know that you have trouble with the Bible, I'm going to try to simplify it and make it understandable and digestible. But in doing so, I'm going to inform you about things that you may have not thought about in the past and may be jarring. Because I've found that a lot of Christians don't actually believe what they read. They have traditions of men that they've learned over their lifetimes, and they apply that to what they believe and think that that's what it says. It's like a trick of the mind. For example, Adam and Eve and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. A lot of people do not believe that that's talking about sex, but it is. Most people think that Adam and Eve ate an apple and that's why God punished them. The people that are smart think it couldn't have been an apple because apples don't grow in that climate, but it was most definitely some kind of fruit, maybe a pomegranate. But they're wrong too. And they never question why Adam and Eve put fig leaves on their private parts instead of their mouth. If they ate an apple, they should cover their mouth, right? They covered their genitals. They knew they were naked. Why did they know that? Because they were sticky. They had sex all over them, that's why. Eve was a hoe, that's what I'm telling you. But there's other things in the Bible just like that, that you've thought all your life were one way, but it's really another way. I'm going to get to some of those things. And I don't mean you specifically, I just mean you in general. Yep, you heard it was a fig. It wasn't a fig, it was a penis. Or whatever the serpent has. In the words of MXR, she going to jail. You're so happy God is talking, and he came to you twice in a dream. Within 2 days, you didn't see him, but you heard his voice. That's possible. I don't doubt that. No, the word fruit is an allegory. It means to be multiple, to be fruitful and multiply. God says it several times in the Bible. Fruit is significant about multiplying. It's judge a man by his fruit, that sort of thing. If they ate fruit, why did God say that he would put enmity between the serpent's seed and Eve's seed, and their offspring would battle, and the serpent's offspring would bruise Eve's offspring's heel, but Eve's offspring would bruise the serpent's offspring's head? Does that sound like the aftermath of digesting fruit? Or does that... When Cain was born, she said, with the help of Lord, I've been given a boy, or a man. And then Abel was born. That word "and" means to continue. Cain and Abel were paternal twins. They were born at the same time, which is why they were sacrificing at the same time. Because when you become of age, you give a sacrifice. You understand? Cain tilled the ground. Abel was a shepherd. He tended flocks. Abel gave an offering of the first fruits, the best of his meat, the fatted calf, the unblemished calf. Cain gave some weeds or some vegetables or whatever that he got from tilling the ground. That's not what the sacrifice calls for. It was a blasphemy against God to offer vegetables, which is why God didn't like it. It's why Cain got jealous and murdered his brother. It's why God punished Cain but didn't kill him, and wouldn't let anybody else kill him either. Cain went on to be a builder of cities, and his sons and his sons' sons built cities and were artificers in metal and made all things made of brass and iron, and were the first musicians on the world. Jubal and all of those guys, Tubal-Cain. So, what happened in the Garden of Eden was Eve was seduced by the devil. There's two trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Knowledge itself is not bad. The knowledge of good and evil is. It will make you as a god, to make you know what gods know. There's a lot to unpack about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life is Jesus Christ. They were both present in the Garden of Eden. That's the devil and Jesus. Only one of them were forbidden to be contacted. God said, don't look at it, don't touch it, don't taste it, don't think about tasting it, don't swallow it. Stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Of the tree of life, you can partake all you want. Well, the devil seduced Eve. Adam was not seduced. He knew full well what he was doing. He did it anyway. He did it because he wanted to do what his wife was doing. Which is why their punishments are different. Eve was tricked. She was seduced. She was hoodwinked. Adam knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it anyway. Which is the reason the punishments are so different and so severe. God said that in that day ye shall surely die if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He did not mean this is a death sentence and you're going to be dead, because they lived almost 1,000 years beyond that. He was talking about in the Lord's day, the day mentioned in the Bible, the coming of the great throne. It's separation from God. That's the death. It's spiritual death. It's not a physical death. In Georgia, at Kevin's parents' house, after we had tidal wave on the highway in Atlanta, I'll tell you more later. That's terrible. Take care of yourself and be safe. Men. Yep, men. That's exactly right. Men and women. They were both banished from the garden, and there was an angel erected there with a flaming sword, which is a metaphor, to protect the garden from man. So mankind was never allowed back in the Garden of Eden, which is what God's plan was all along. And in the end days, things will be turned back to the way they were created. That means the Garden of Eden will be there again. That's where the new city of Jerusalem will come to. It's probably in Jerusalem is where the Garden of Eden is, under it. Everything else of note that happened in the Bible happened in that area, so that might as well be there too. There's no proof of that, but it's reasonable. All right. It's 10:14, and I'm going to get on out of here. You guys take care and look forward to my new videos coming up very soon. I hope that you're safe there in Georgia, and I hope that you are happy there in Florida. And I hope that everybody sticks around and helps me make this ministry a good thing. Take care of yourself. I love you. That was scary, but now I sound like a fruitcake. Woohoo! There's nothing wrong with being a fruitcake. Like, subscribe, and share. Pass this video around to your friends. Pass it around to your enemies. They need it too. And I'll see you on Wednesday. Follow one of the links in the description below, or paypal.me/JakeJohnsonBand if you want to support the musician or tip the guy or whatever you want to do. Every little bit helps. You guys have a great night. I love you, and I'll see you Wednesday.